he would have crossed the country and done who knows what to get her back. So, write what you know.
That's right. Well, I think that's a huge compliment to them. I'm sure they're honored to be that inspiration.
Well, I just hope that someday I'll have a marriage that lives up to theirs. Let's put it that way.
One thing that I really loved as watching these books progress and watching these characters develop is how Eragon and Roran are each really coming into their own. So what do you think is the biggest character difference between Eragon and Roran?
Roran.
Roran. We'll be doing that back and forth for another few years.
Yeah. Well, we can tackle the question about the pronunciation in a second, but as far as the characters go, Eragon worries about things. Roran worries about certain things. Roran worries about the people he cares about. Katrina, his friends from Carvajal, the people he serves under, and the people he commands, eventually in Brisingr. But that's pretty much where his concerns end. He doesn't really worry about the land as a whole. I mean, he thinks about it occasionally, but his concerns are very personal. And he is decisive in a way that Eragon isn't. I mean, let's put it this way. If Katrina's in danger, he'll say to himself, Roran will say to himself, okay, I'm going to go over there and rescue Katrina. And that's it. He goes and he does it. And it doesn't matter what's in his way, he goes and he does it. Even if it were to kill him, he would go and try to rescue her.
He's not a hand-wringer.
No. Whereas Eragon, if he saw, for example, Arya was in danger, he's going to look at her and say, okay, I'm going to go rescue Arya, and let's see, I have to run this way and run that way, and I have to, chop off this guy's head, but he's kind of turning to flee, so maybe I should just let him go, and this other guy, well, maybe I shouldn't really kill him, but maybe I can just cripple him instead.
He spends a long time in his head and in the process, and Roran is really active.
Part of that is the fact that Eragon has to use magic, and magic means that you really have to think about the consequences of your words and your actions, because if you say the wrong thing, you could not only kill people you care about, but you could kill yourself. And of course, Eragon has been saddled with responsibilities far larger than those of Roran's. When I was originally plotting out the series, I actually envisioned it as the story of three pseudo-brothers, I guess you could call it. We had Eragon, we had Murtagh, and we had Roran. And they don't all get equal screen time. Eragon gets the most, of course, and Roran ends up getting the second most. In fact, when I was writing Eragon, I actually debated at one point having Roran accompany Eragon from Carvajal all the way up to when he and Brom go to Tirm, and then having Roran go back to Carvajal at that point. But didn't work out with the story, but I've always envisioned it as a sort of, the story of these three half-brothers, if you will. And that's actually something like in the fourth book, we'll be seeing more of Murtagh then.
Ooh, I'm looking forward to that.
Wait, equal out the balance here.
Well, he is an intriguing character.
We haven't seen much of him in the middle two books, and of course we really can't because he's fighting against Eragon and the Varden now, but we'll see a lot more of him in the fourth book, and I think readers will get to know him a little bit better, and especially, hopefully they'll understand the situation he's been forced to deal with now a little bit better.
Have a little bit of sympathy, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a bad person. He's just been raised in a difficult environment and then stuck in an impossible situation.
Yeah, and it's actually one of my favorite parts of the book, and one of the things I love about it is I feel like it really is a moment where Eragon is struggling with his role as a leader, that he's pretty newly in still, and discovering what that means and what his own limitations are, which is a really interesting part of that interaction between them.
Thank you. That's actually something I think that's a big theme in this book, is there are a lot of the characters are struggling with how to lead properly. We see Nasuwata really dealing with some more of the problems that come with leading the Varden, and Roran as well is becoming sort of assuming a position of greater authority within the Varden, and he's presented with a number of difficult choices with how to do that and how to lead the men that he's given command over, and also how to obey orders as well. And even Saphira has a few choices like that, I think.
Do you have a favorite character from the cycle?
That's a difficult question. I'm very fond of Angela, because she's based on my sister, of course, Angela. but she's not really a true character in that sense. She's more like an exaggerated version of my sister. I'm very fond of Nasuada and Eragon, of course, and Arya, but probably Saphira's my favorite character. I've said that before, but it's the truth.
How could it be any other way?
In fact, that's one of the things I really love about Brisingr, was getting a chance to write a few chapters from Saphira's point of view.
And I wanted to ask you about that. How did you decide to go about capturing her point of view? You do it so beautifully. It's such a unique and even non-human view of the world that you capture in those chapters. How did that come about?
I was a little uncertain about how to tackle it at first. I thought it was going to be a big problem. And I knew that I had to do it right or not at all, because she is such an integral part of the series. You know, if I messed up chapters from her point of view, it's kind of like, well, why even do them then? But it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be, because I've spent so many years now writing dialogue from her point, not from her point of view, but writing dialogue of hers in Eragon's mind. And I had sort of constructed a certain mindset of my own, that when I went to write a piece of Saphira's dialogue, I think, okay, this is how she thinks. This is how she's going to react to the situation. And oftentimes her reaction isn't the way anyone else would react. You know, it's a bit of an unusual reaction. So when I went to write her point of view, I already had sort of a framework for the way her thoughts and her dialogue would work. And I just started to try to build on that, okay? How would she react to everything else? How would she observe everything else? I think the biggest unique thing I did with her point of view was the way she and other dragons view things with chains of association, I guess, you know, where she won't look at something and say, oh, that's a campfire. She'll look at that and say, well, that's a campfire that smells smoky, that burns and bites and flickers, and she doesn't think of a name necessarily, she thinks of all the associations with an item. And that's actually a holdover from my idea, from when the dragons were a wild race, because at least within the mythology of my world, they never invented a language of their own. The way they communicated was through telepathy and through these connections, if you will, these associations. And it's still how dragons think to this day, even though now they have the structure of language to provide a framework for those associations. So Saphira doesn't always use words, you know, sometimes it's feelings or sense or stuff like that, and that's what I was trying to convey as well. And of course, growing up with a dog and cats in the house helped a great deal when writing about a dragon.
Yeah. Really? So how did you decide how to say it? Did you look at the structure of the different words and say, okay, it makes sense that this word would be pronounced this way?
In fact, that's how I started figuring out the structure of the language, is saying, okay, this is what I've done, this is how I think it would be said, and so I'm going to start basing things off those sounds in the future. And I'd done some non-standard sentence structure and stuff, so I said, okay, this is my sentence structure going forward. I did a few interesting things with sounds in this book. For example, the nomad tribes, I started giving a hint of their own language in this book. I actually worked out more of it than I actually put in the book. So what they do is, like Japanese, for example, they alternate between consonants and vowels, for the most part. You pronounce every single consonant and vowel in their language. But whenever they have a double letter, whether it's a double vowel or a double consonant, they pronounce it twice as long. So they have for example, one of the names is Inapashuna, and you hold the n sound twice, Inapashuna. I'm not a native speaker of it, but
you're as native as they get.
I was trying to give a little bit different feel for that language than the Dwarvish or the ancient language. And of course, we see a little bit of the Urgal language. For the look of the Urgal language and the sound, I pulled out an Eragon translation of an Eragon foreign edition that was translated into Polish.
Oh, really?
Just because Polish, compared with English, looks so spiky.
Yeah, there are a
chunky.
lot of up and down cadences.
Yeah, so I didn't copy any words from Polish, but just the look of some of the words gave me an idea of where to go.
I feel like the languages also really reflect the people. The ancient language feels like elves would speak it, just in the way the words roll off the tongue and the kinds of noises that are used. In the more guttural dwarvish language really feels like the dwarves too.
Yeah, I love the dwarf language. That's my favorite of the lot, partly because it's not based on anything else. It's all my own. The ancient language is kind of an odd mix, because on one hand it alternates very flowing words like Edur Karthungave,